Hello, good morning again, and thanks for this opportunity. Thank you to the organizers. And this is a wonderful institution. I've been here several times over the last 15 years. And let me start, first of all, by recognizing the impressive contributions by the contributors this week. And this is a wonderful program, so it's always great to be in Salzburg. But the issues today set me thinking, set some of my guys at the ministry thinking, and it's given us an opportunity to relook at an enduring problem. Enduring so that by a new look, we should be able to design new approaches. We need to recognize the economic paradigms in developing and transitional economies, such as my own country, situated within a continent where institutions and governance is lacking, crisis in leaderships, and any discussion of social mobility, therefore, will totally fit into the politics and to the policy agendas of many countries. The attainment of this is a challenge for us, and we lack, most of us in Africa lack the policy architecture, we lack the enduring institutions. Let me show you, I just have a couple of slides. I don't want you to be fixated on it. Look at me and my beautiful Kinti. So I'm just doing a short intro, look at a few education reforms, look at the critical issues which bedevil us in Africa, access to education and equity. How do we look at our scarce resources, not only in terms of politics, but in terms of what is demanded by our people in their social mobility. And then also I will look at the question of finance. I hope that we have a little time for that. We continue to evolve our educational paradigm, and we are amongst the best, supposedly the best, and upwardly mobile in terms of the export of our intellect, whether it's as basic teachers or teachers in the basic educational institutions to the rest of Africa and the world, and of course, in terms of exporting our super-powered intellect to the international arena. You all know of His Excellency Kofi Annan, who was the UN former Secretary General. In Ghana, in the 80s, we underwent a post-independence restructuring of education, which is still prevalent today. And we have adopted a 2-year KG, 6-year primary, 3-year junior high school, and a 3-year secondary high school. The access to the secondary high school, however, is for those who have sat a newly introduced, at that time, basic education certificate examination. And that is conducted by the West African Exams Council, which comprises of the 5 English-speaking African countries. Nigeria is about 170 million people still going on, and Ghana is 25 million. Then you have Sierra Leone, Gambia, and Sierra Leone, Gambia, yes. And the rest of West Africa, there are 15 countries that make up the economic sub-region. The rest of them are Francophonie. Indeed, Ghana is surrounded by Francophonie countries. We in Ghana have our 1992 constitution, which makes access to quality basic education free, compulsory, universal. We also work very closely within the international education development goals of the Education Fast Track Initiative and the MDGs, which, as you know, have the overall goal of implementing policies of universal primary education globally. Access to education at the primary school level is available to the majority of Ghanaian children. Kindergarten reached a gross enrollment rate of 98.4%. Primary school, we have the access, we have a gross enrollment rate of 96.4%, but always look at the button in the deprived districts. And then we look at the completion rate of 91.6%. Then we have the junior high school access, total of 1.335, a completion rate of 67%, and the completion rate in the deprived districts, which is significantly 10% lower. This is the enrollment rate by graphs, and the senior high school access is, you see, a significant drop to almost half with a 728,000 plus, and a completion rate of only 32.9%. These figures do not reveal the regional disparities which are systemic within our educational system. In our country, we have what we call the savannah belt of the country, which is in the poorer north, and there are, 3 regions which sit in this belt, where it is characterized by endemic poverty, coupled with stark gender disparities, especially in the rural and deprived communities. Significant numbers of those who do not complete, those who do not go to school at all, those who cannot enroll in school, those who drop out, are in these regions. These make up part of the 12 million girl children in Africa who do not enroll in school, and part of the 32 million students who are out of basic school in Africa. They form part of the 5 to 14-year-old population of Sub-Saharan Africa, which is expected to it's projected that they would be growing in 2020, and the region, the Sub-Saharan Africa, has to respond to the demands of some 77 million new students. Looking at this, this is a problem that I confront on an everyday basis. This is not a theoretical analysis. This is not about politics. It's not a blame game. We have to be accountable to our people. We cannot fail our young people. They see social mobility via education. When I heard some people say, no, what about education? No, in Africa, no. Education is everything. It is life. It is life. It enables you to move from the most deprived community upwards to be the president, to be the leader of business, and to be academically gifted. And of course, we believe that it unlocks the doors to wealth. We then must look at issues of insufficient funding for basic education, which is my primary focus today. Basic education, Ghana in particular, has been rebased to a middle-income country. So therefore, I think I made the point earlier, that development aid flows are now, because we are middle income, they are now being directed to tertiary education. Let me give you some scenarios. The Ministry of Education in Ghana is the largest single ministry and receives some 29% of our national budget, and accounted before our rebasing for 9.8% of our GDP. We were then clearly above the UNESCO and the African Union's recommended minimum of approximately 6% until our economy was rebased last year. Our education expenditure now as a share of GDP is 5.8%, still one of the highest in sub-Saharan Africa. We have 2.5% of our VAT revenues going into a dedicated GET fund, which feeds the educational infrastructure and development. 95% of my ministry's budget is dedicated to payment of teachers' salaries. Development assistance, I didn't bring that chart, but development assistance, I believe, if you can see, accounted for only 2.5% of our income. Basic education, donor poor, and yet the highest needs, the most basic of levels. We're not talking about even quality, we're not talking about quality of teachers or anything like that. We're talking about provision of infrastructure. In my country, when we took over on the 7th of January 2009, there were 5,500 schools under trees. I don't know if you know what that means. The children in communities were sitting outside under trees because the communities were cut off. They didn't have access to roads or to teachers or anything, and the desperate parents set up these schools under trees. We dedicated ourselves to eradicating schools under trees. We have only reached 1,266 schools under trees. We're looking at infrastructure where sometimes, when I heard somebody say that the politicians don't go out into the field, I am in the field, not only because I'm a woman and I'm concerned with gender equity. My husband is sitting there. He comes from one of the most deprived areas in the furthest north of the country, where the inequities are systemic, they are endemic, they are persistent, and where you have really the poorest of the poor. So we are looking at issues of not only infrastructure, not only teachers, we are looking at basic issues of electricity. I want to bring about ICT to the children because it's easier for, you need to bring up the children. This is an information technology revolution, and we need our children to come up. There's no electricity in the schools where we want to send the computers to. So you look at also the 61 deprived communities which need to have targeted, specific interventions. And then you look at the whole scenario of quality of education, teacher-centered, because we still, even though 95% of my payroll is going to the 275,000 staff of the Ghana Education Service, which deals with the basic education, we still have a desperate shortage of over 30,000 more trained teachers. The teachers will not go to the deprived communities. When they go there, they do not stay there. The issues of time on task, recent studies by the World Bank have shown that time on task in Ghana is one of the lowest globally, 40%, and the teachers just will not stay unless there are incentives. I've told you that we take about 30% of our national budget. I've told you that we also have a dedicated fund where 2.5% of our VAT is going into education. Why then are we facing such an inefficiency within our educational system? We had a sharp focus, or I had a rude awakening when I went into the education ministry in February this year. They had just conducted the national NER, the National Assessment Test, and it said that only 10% of our children were functionally literate. So then, big headlines, failure. Our government is a failure. Meanwhile, we had been in power for 2 years, You know, our government is a failure because of this. But when we saw when the last BECE, those are the junior high school, age 15 exams, came out earlier this year, in fact in October this year, they revealed results that shocked most of us, indicative still of multiple challenges in a system in which we are pouring in money. It is not about the money, it is about the money being targeted into the areas which need it the most. So you have 163 district assemblies, and 88 had schools in their areas, or 88 were below the 50% pass rate in terms of their children in those district assemblies being unable to enter senior high schools. Out of the 272,000 students who sat for the junior high school exam, only 172,000 obtained senior high school placement. I am looking very, very seriously at this, not only looking at it, I have put into place emergency programs to assist the students, targeting especially girl children in the underserved and the deprived 3 regions. Gender disparity is stark. It's as low as 30% of enrollment in senior high school. And most worryingly, these girls are just not doing science. You have less than 10% of the girls doing science, and government is pouring in social intervention policies across the board. Free school uniforms. You might not think it's a big thing here. We have to wear school uniforms, and the children would not go to school because their parents could not afford a school uniform. The government has stepped in, and we poured in. Last year, we distributed we distributed over 1.5 million free school uniforms. We have capitation grants so that parents who have to pay even $1 a term cannot afford it and do not send their children to school. The government pays for them. We have free exercise books. We have free textbooks. There are problems, I agree, in the targeting and the focus and the spread of the textbooks. And for me, even though it is necessary, I find it so sad that 1 meal a day will let a mother send her child, a girl child, to school and keep her in school. And we've had to expand the school feeding program. And in some places in the northern parts of the country, we give financial inducements. The World Food Program has stepped up to assist us, and they give packages to the girl children to enter school, remain in school. We pay examination fees, and yet, we are still struggling to find the right ingredients which make up the quality education for all of our children. We now need to prioritize our needs in education. We need to decide how we can look at the income gaps, at the disparities, and see how we can help our children to upwardly mobilize. In Ghana, and indeed the rest of Africa, we need to make that transition to a knowledge economy. We need to look at appropriate investments in knowledge, in institution building, in relevant technologies. It's not enough to say that if a child doesn't have a textbook, so he or she should not be given a computer. We need to bring our children up. It is critical for us, our survival, for Africa, when we are going into social mobility within the context of education. I now see the critical need, the nexus, in synergizing our education needs and our education policies with other developmental frameworks. Is it enough that we must attain the MDGs? They look remotely unattainable by 2015. due to a variety of systemic reasons that we need to sit down, sit up, and prioritize and selectively target. We must look at the issue of endemic poverty. We must look at the issue of hunger, where school children go to sleep hungry and therefore are unable to read or write. We must look, in Ghana we have a national illiteracy rate of 40%, and we have a great non-formal education program for adults. We need to upscale that. We need to look at the environmental degradation. We need to ensure that our girl children goes to school and stays in school. Just over 10% of pupils enrolling in primary school enter tertiary institutions in my country. Out of that, only 3% are enrolled in polytechnics and universities. The rest are into other post-secondary, such as nursing, colleges of education, agricultural colleges, technical and vocational. Where are those children, 80% of our children, who enroll into primary school and do not proceed to higher education? Where are they? When we talk about elevating social mobility through education, what happens to them? What happens to them? Do we think of them, those who are dropouts? Do we think of how we can assist them? We talk about, I have started a massive injection of technical and vocational skills training program, highly stigmatized because nobody wants their children to go into a vocational a job. Everybody believes that acquiring higher education is the way out of poverty. But we need to become basic. We need to ensure that our students acquire employable skills. We need to ensure that we give our pupils the chance to be entrepreneurial, to be visionary, to be aspirational, and most of all, to be employable. To conclude, we in Africa cannot continue to remain on the periphery. We can't afford this. We can't afford to continuously be at the edge of global educational standards. Globalization is here with us. We are the politicians. We are the drivers of policy change. We are the people elected to give our people the appropriate strategies to rectify the status quo. On the part of governments, it is our duty to provide the space, to provide the institutions, to provide the funding, to provide the mechanisms to ensure that there are no more barriers to mobility as gender inequity and poverty, and that we must be able to guarantee protection for the poor, for the children, to enable them to access education to the highest level. We cannot default in this. We have learned from the Arab Spring. The movement is on our continent. It is in Africa. We, as politicians, we cannot afford to be blind, to be deaf, and to be dumb. Our youth demands that we shift the paradigm. Our youth demand education as an acceleration to social mobility, and we, as government, must respond to that demand and know that education needs funding, that education needs visionary leadership, that education is indeed the cradle of Africa going forward.